Georgia's well-funded program, mixed results with studies showing no significant long-term gains. Even Florida's voluntary pre-K, serving over 70% of 4-year-olds, has seen declining effectiveness. Test scores flatlined by elementary school. State after state tries this model and it keeps failing. Why bet on a broken promise? Second, funding is a trap. Michigan's Great Start Readiness Program gets roughly $9,100 per child from the state, but the real cost, estimated at $12,700. That's a $3,500 gap per kid, straight from our budget. State funding's a yearly gamble. Lansing's whims could leave us stranded. This trade-off is stark. Every dollar spent closing the per child gap pulls resources from proven student benefits. With unstable financial backing, this program could jeopardize Hudsonville's future stability. Fiscal responsibility demands prioritizing sustainable investments over a risky, resource-draining initiative. Pre-K for all may seem promising, but it's a budget buster Hudsonville can't afford. Third, we can't staff it. Pre-K demands certified teachers, but Michigan's already short. If funding falters, competitive pay vanishes. Hudsonville thrives on quality. Why risk a half-baked program? Studies say weak pre-K can harm kids. Our 4-year-olds aren't guinea pigs. Fourth, the irony of support. Pre-K programs are often touted as a lifeline for families, promising early education and a break on childcare costs. When they're only part-time, they can make life harder, not easier. For working parents, this mismatch turns a supposed benefit into a burden, undermining the very support these programs aim to provide. Finally, Hudsonville doesn't need it. Many families already have early education options. In other districts with pre-K for all, affluent families snag spots meant for low-income kids. Further proof that the model is doomed from the start. Less than half of Michigan's eligible kids enroll in GSRP anyway. Factor in half-day or partial week classes, limited or no busing, spotty quality, and you have all the makings of a disaster. Our kids need targeted wins, not a blanket flop. Here's the bottom line. We can't solve our problems by adding new ones. Pre-K for all isn't a silver bullet. It's a risk we don't need. Instead, let's focus on the challenges we're already facing and build on what we know works. But don't just take my word for it. Do your own research, look beyond the feel-good stories, and dig into the hard data. Talk to districts that have tried this and came up empty. The evidence is out there. It's not anecdotal. Our kids deserve better than a program with a track record of failure. They need us to say no to pre-K for all and yes to tackling the fires we're already fighting. Let's not invite decline when we should be driving achievement. Hudsonville's future depends on it.
Robbie, do we have anyone else? Okay. Well, we're going to now proceed to the discussion items on our agenda, and it so happens the first one is pre-K for all. So, Rebecca, are you going to read that discussion?
Yes, we returned Ms. Vincent, and this is the day to talk a little bit about the pre-K for all, that program and all the programs that we offer at BCC. So go ahead.
Well, thank you for inviting us. We're excited to be able to share. My name is Becky Vincent. I'm the Early Childhood Director for the district.
And I'm Tricia Madej. I'm the Assistant Director at the Early Childhood Center. Nice to meet you all.
We have the privilege of running an amazing program, and it's been in Hudsonville for many, many years. We had the opportunity to have Joy come last week, and I was telling her that we are in our 11th year in the ECC building itself and operating throughout the district for the last 20 plus years. That really includes a variety of things. In your board packet, you should have the current hours of the programming that we are offering. We started the program with Rebecca Fabiano's help many, many years ago when the district really needed before and after school wraparound. It was as simple as that. And Hudsonville, over the years, really said they need more than that. And so we added summer programming, we added preschool in, we have just a variety of different things in the building. With that said, we moved into the ECC building about it'll be our 11th year this next school year. And that was a visionary move from the board, but also the district saying that those programs in 12 to 15 different places throughout the district was not the best way for us to run all of the programs that our district needed. And so putting them in one place provided us an opportunity to better collaborate, but also to better see how many students need that, as well as support our summer and our before and after program. So with all that said, now we're moving into the state really organizing and putting themselves into early childhood as a goal. We've seen this coming. This is not a surprise, and they're using that title of pre-K for all to really enhance a program that has existed in Michigan for many, many years. It was MSRP, it was GSRP, and now that language is pre-K for all. So we wanted to share a little bit about the things that we're gonna be doing to support that. Really a program that we've already had, but seeing the growth that really our county, but also Hudsonville personally really needs from our community.
Yeah, when we think about pre-K for all, really the overall takeaway is just the opportunity that it brings to our students to have that opportunity to be in preschool programming without the burden of having to pay for tuition, which we know can be limiting for some of our families. So it really provides an opportunity for our students to get that early intervention. I'm excited to say that after our open house and our early enrollment that we are seeing an expansion. We're gonna have the opportunity to open 5 classrooms, which you can imagine is going to be supporting a lot of our students within the community. It is obviously free because it's funded through the state, but then it also goes a step further to provide free lunches for our students. There's transportation that's gonna be available for our half-day programming, and then we have our wraparound care that we're able to provide at a discounted tuition because of this opportunity to have the free preschool for our students. So we're really excited about the expansion and what that's going to do, not only for our preschoolers, but the families within our community.
So, yeah, so it's been a lot of work, it's been a long discussion on what this looks like moving forward. Looking forward to the opportunity for some of our littles to not only start in our system, but then stay in our system when they go through. Questions?
What has been the response from parents? Are they overwhelmingly coming and saying, please give me options, pre-K, I mean, just give me options, 3, 4, whatever. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last summer, at the end of the summer is when they really lifted all the requirements for enrollment, which is a wonderful thing. And what we saw was an influx of families that were interested in the programming, electing to transition from our tuition preschool to our pre-K for all, at the time known as GSRP programming. So we're really seeing a great desire from all of our families. And we've really been very intentional about what we offer because we want to make sure that we're supporting the needs of our families. So there's transportation provided for some of our programs for the families that need it. And then again, that wraparound care. So we feel like we're doing our best job to meet the needs of all of our families and what they're looking for.
And they're asking for it.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a need, and that variety that we can offer has really kind of answered the different family dynamics that we're hearing. The half day with transportation to allow those families that need that option, the wraparound childcare because that's a need. We also recognize that we want to make sure that we take care of other programs within, I would say Hudsonville, and so we're trying to be very conscious of not overloading our programming and allowing other programs to run as well. Pre-K for all is available to all of the different resources in, I should say all programs, so our Apple Trees or Tutor Times, they have the option of those resources and can do that as well. So we're kind of balancing all the things that we're hearing from families.
So, you mentioned 5 additional classrooms. Okay, so and I don't know if this goes to you or to Mr. Briggs or to Dr. Vanderjack, but.
Maybe to Mrs. Armstrong.
or Mrs. Taylor, who's not here. But anyway, okay, so we've got 5 additional classrooms. We have the space right now for those 5 additional ones, okay? So what we're talking about is hiring 5 additional teachers, or what's that cost gonna be, the initial?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. If I can, I'll take it. Please. The 5 classrooms that we're talking about, a few of them are existing students and staff, and so they would move into those GSRP or pre-K for all, now titled, categories. And then we also have an opportunity to add staff. And what we're seeing, because we're Hudsonville and we have just a beautiful track record of a great place to work, that has not been a challenge in the past. I anticipate that will stay the same. We are working very hard to be competitive with all of our other programs in the area that are also running. We had someone ask what our Hudsonville gem is, or what is our wow factor. And I would say it's the people and the programming and the commitment to everything that we do. If we run it well, and we put everything into it, and so, we will do the same with staffing and make sure we find the best people for all those spots.
Okay, and how much is this going to cost us in 25, 26 dollar wise?
Do you wanna take that, Dad?
I mean, everything we budgeted has been, these programs cover their education cost. We're already heating the room. We could charge custodial cost for these grants, some maintenance cost. So, yeah, was already mentioned, it covers food service, busing. It's got a separate allocation for busing, so it doesn't, everything we've seen, the program is not an additional burden on the general fund.
How much of a?
In fact, to prove that,
Mhm.
these can, the preschool budgets are all within a separate fund.
Mhm.
It's a community ed fund, but yeah, it's, never seen the costing, other than what, the program up the hill here is bond funded, paid for the building. Same as the ECC building was renovated in 2013 and 2014 with bond funds, so it's no different from our general programs.
Is there extra money in the budget provided by the state for this year? Is that what's causing us to think about this, or?
So it's priority of the state. It's been a priority of administration for 2 or 3 years. It's
Mhm.
been work is, like you said, they've been working up to it, so we're not surprised it's coming, so it's funded, it's state revenue.
You see that going away? I mean, what kind of a commitment is the state making? And I just wanna look down the road.
Yeah.
If we start.
Yeah, I mean, it's subject to the next legislature, but I mean, it's generally not, I don't think they got into this to fund it for a year or two.
Okay.
I mean, preschool programs, it's what's happening, there's a need for it. If parents weren't asking for it, we wouldn't, the state wouldn't be, making it a priority.
Yeah, there's bipartisan support for
Yeah.
this. There has been, so I agree with you, Pat, that funding fluctuates, it does for everything else in education. But there's been bipartisan support for this endeavor for a number of years. And Granholm has spearheaded it to get through. I think you're right.
How about, the fact that from a facility standpoint, right now we've got 5 rooms and you've got the availability for it. Have we looked at it, or is this gonna be part of the thing that we're gonna be looking at as we roll out and look at future bond proposals, those types of things?
So the overall,
I don't foresee that. I mean, it's like every year,
Yeah.
we look at class sizes, class counts, what
Mhm.
programming should be throughout the district.
Uh-huh.
I think it always fluctuates. I think opportunities that we always try to create for our kids, especially our little ones,
Mhm.
it's a great opportunity. If for any reason the program does go away, which I don't think it will in
Mhm.
my lifetime, but, what you're talking about, littles, that by the following year, hopefully they are not impacted, because we're on to the next program.
Mhm.
It's not like we're getting rid of 11th grade at some point, and we have 10th graders to figure out what to do with them, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So to say that at least this is a group of students that it won't be new to them if we do have to eliminate it in 10 or 15 years. To Pat's point, because we have a new legislature that says, you know what, we're doing away with this. Well, it won't impact the 2-year-olds that had no idea.
Mhm.
About to. It might be a brother or sister that's impacted, and that says,
Mhm.
but, we see a lot of, other areas that are increasing more and more of their, some of their littlest learners coming in. They get into the system and like to stay in the system.
Well, one of the things that we may be able to look at is what effect it has on how early kids are getting potty trained. That might be something that we could look at in our community to see, No, and that's just, go ahead, Don.
No, I was just gonna say, the way I understand a lot of the formerly called GSRP programming is they are looking for places to have the programming. And if we said we're not interested, it just means they go to the next daycare facility or the next school. So I think, that in and of itself, to me, is a strong point for us to continue and to expand it, because if not here, where? And we think we have the best programs. So for me, I would just as soon have our Hudsonville students be in our Hudsonville programming versus only having the choice to go to GSRP at some other building owned by a private industry. That's kind of my take on it.
Totally agree, yeah.
One other question, I'm looking at the schedule, and I've been somewhat involved with GSRP the last couple of years because my 4-year-old granddaughter is in a GSRP program. Your chart is like the 4 and 5 day full day preschool free, which is the great start, and then you have full day preschool childcare reduced tuition. So tell me the difference between those two. Is it a qualification, or what is the difference between those two programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we were hearing from our families is that wraparound childcare was a really big challenge. There's only so many places, there's only so many home daycares that do that offering. You can only ask your neighbor for so much help, you need to find a plan. So really what we found is that we wanted a wraparound component. This year, we have 2 classrooms that are able to be, these are our 2 classrooms that we're going to kind of flip over into a GSRP. They're offering that programming, but our families are paying a full price childcare for that day. What we're gonna do in those rooms for next year is we're gonna provide a half day of the GSRP program, so that 3-hour half day programming. We can't do it all day, we're not at that capacity yet, but it provides us an opportunity to reduce the rate because some of that is going to be GSRP funded. The rest will then be given to the families, but at a much better rate. So the hope was to soften that childcare need when you can't do a 9 to 4 Monday through Friday. Some families can do that and others cannot. So we were trying to, again, kind of balance how many things we can offer and still be sustainable. And that's where that transportation and half day also fell. Those intentional decisions about which things we could run and run well, and that man kind of worked within the system that we have for Hudsonville.
And do you have parents have questions about whether or not the quality of the material is different between either the all-day GSRP or the, half-day GSRP and the rest, the wraparound childcare?
Yeah, we actually don't have any concerns about that. GSRP or current preschool tuition classrooms are utilizing the exact same curriculum. So their days are going to look very much the same as to what they are now. It's just going to provide them with free preschool.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
The one thing I would add, we talked a little bit about early childhood, the continuum of our students learning SOAR, being a part of the system, having their, big kids go to first grade and their littles go to our building. It's just a beautiful thing for our families to start in the district as soon as they can, and then to build up into feeling very comfortable and very settled in pre-KK roundup when we go to those meetings. That continuum we really have felt is a strong comfort for our families. It doesn't just become school right away. And so we would say the same, having them in the system sooner is really been a helpful thing, and I think families have really enjoyed that as well.
Thank you.
So, and you touched on a couple of these things already, but just generally speaking, I have 2 questions. One is, how does what's being suggested for next year compared to what we're already doing? Like, what's different, what's new versus what are we already doing? And then 2, how does this compare to what surrounding districts are doing, if you don't mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the changes, it's really the opportunity to provide the free preschool
Sure.
opportunity. Everything else would look the exact same.
Yeah.
There are some specific requirements with our schedules, but that's been research-based and best practice. So we inevitably implement it in all of our classrooms currently, just to provide the best education for our earliest learners. And then when you look across the county, many of them made this shift over the last few years to go all GSRP or pre-K for all, because there was a need for it and parents are interested. Yeah.
Hey, what's the place up on Baldwin, by the library?
But the Primrose or something?
Oh, it's going to be a new
Pre-K?
private something. I think it's actually for elementary, isn't it?
Is it,
I
Early
haven't
on.
gotten a chance to dig into it very much yet. I
Which
do
library,
understand.
Yeah, it's Primrose, I think it's.
Yeah.
It is, based out of another state, haven't dug into it very much.
just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see where there'd be some other entities wanting to get into the space. so, okay.
Thanks to both of you for all the work on this. I know it's not heavy,
Great
but
job.
a lot.
Appreciate it.
Good work.
And feel free to come and visit. I was kind of bragging up our construction. It looks real pretty, so feel
Yeah.
free to come and visit.
It is.
It'll be the highlight of your day.
It
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
You might get a hug.
Does the board have any more questions or for Becky?
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All right, next up we have the My School Voice Survey. I'll give you a little bit of context on the survey. A few years ago, a group out of Kent County wanted to do a survey that gave more of a, kind of a survey to students, staff, and community members about what kind of a climate is taking place in their buildings. A lot of this, quite frankly, stemmed from very similar to the strategic planning survey that we use here. The overarching theme behind that started in a district I used to work in, and that's where that survey stuff started. It traveled with the former superintendent here. When he was there, it traveled and made its way here. They wanted to do that more countywide. We have the main thing with our strategic plan survey is we're looking at trend data over time from our student, staff, and community. This is more of a look at how do you compare to other districts, maybe in the county, maybe in the area, maybe similar districts. What does that look like? So since then, in the last couple of years, they have expanded it from out of Kent across the state, and districts all over the state now offer this survey. I don't know the exact number. I tried to find out some more information today, but a lot of them throughout the state offer this survey. Not a ton in Ottawa County, because we do some different work in Ottawa County. So we started talking about how can we gather some of this data, and every year I get 2 emails a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, saying, are you guys interested? Finally, I said, let's take a deeper dive into this, because maybe it gives us an understanding of not only how we compare to ourselves with our strategic planning survey, but how we might be able to compare and analyze our data amongst others. If 85% of our kids feel welcome in the environment that they're in, and the average is 50%, I would say we're doing pretty well. But if ours is 85% and everybody else is 95%, that gives us a different context. A lot of times, we look at how amazing we're doing until you compare yourself to others, and you're like, there's some areas we can improve on. There are always areas to improve on. So we want to take a look at this survey. We think it's a survey that's been well vetted on what it looks like. I do have, there's some questions in there that we might want to say, what do we want to choose, what do we not want to choose. The main crux of this survey is to try to gather feedback specifically from our staff, from our students, and from our community. I'm not as concerned about some of the other narratives behind potential questions on there. One of them is about gender. If you look at the options, ours would be option 2, that we would recommend that we use. We're not asking the board to approve the survey. I know the board doesn't sit there and approve surveys and so forth. You would approve actions if they come out of the findings. But I also want you aware of the survey that we'd like to administer. Parents would be aware of the survey ahead of time, like other surveys. They're welcome to opt out. Some parents do, some don't. That's completely up to the parent. Do I think there's merit in filling this out? I do. I think it's always good to get information. It's not tied to a student, it's tied to their perceptions of what's taking place. So it's a lot different when you put your name and grade and everything about demographics. We'd want to know where they are. And we have enough kids and community members that we're not gonna be able to isolate who said what. But we'd like to find out, are there different perceptions from our buildings, amongst our buildings, as well as around the area. So Lindsay's put a lot of work into this, so I asked Lindsay to join us here. If you have additional questions that she might be able to answer, hopefully have a chance to dive into a little bit, to look at the surveys, what they look like. Our intent, quite frankly, would be to submit the opportunity to do these surveys as early as tomorrow, to administer them, in March, and start getting the data, and then find out what it looks like across the board. And this also gives us, sorry, Dr. Cooper, also gives us an opportunity to do some of that, consistent, survey questions to get data, as opposed to every 3 years. Say, let's wait another 3 years to find out, by that time the train might have, come off the tracks. So, I'm sorry, Dr. Cooper, you had a question.
Would we have to pay for this survey? Is there a fee for us, or do we?
It is free.
It's free.
And how quickly
Well,
are,
somebody pays for it, but.
we're all paying for it?
Well,
Roundabout
no, I
way.
think it's paid, I think Kent County's paying for it, so I don't know for sure.
So from a timing perspective, are all the people participating taking it at about the same time that the results then are like a month out or a week out, or?
Is it all right if I speak to that?
Please.
Okay, so our proposed timeline I did include in your board packet. I'm Lindsay Bullhouse, by the way, for those of you who I haven't met. I'm State and Federal Program Coordinator, and part of my work is with school and district improvement. So that's kind of where I'm involved in this project. Best practice with school and district improvement is to gather perception feedback from students, parents, and staff on an annual basis. So that's an important part of it. Speaking to the timeline, survey results are available within 2 weeks of administration. So our hope is to give the survey the week of April 28th. We'll have results by May 9, and then we can analyze those results as a district improvement team at our May 20th meeting. So that's the proposed timeline for that.
And that's what other districts will be doing too, so we can get their data?
Yeah, there's a couple cycles that you can do. There's a fall and spring cycle. We'd be part of the spring cycle. So
Okay.
those that mirror the spring cycle, which are quite a few. I don't have the number. I can certainly get that information. But those that do administer at that time of year, you want to get comparable data to the timing, because they feel different at different times of year.
Yeah.
Right? You give it after
Exactly.
spring break, you feel different than before spring
Yeah.
break. So.
Okay, good.
And there are 108 districts who participated in spring of 2024.
Michigan.
Correct.
And but those results aren't out, like they're not, I don't see them on the spring 2023 survey results are out. Or like they give highlights of the, from the statewide aggregate data, and they don't for 24 yet?
I think 24 is there. That says spring 2024 at the top of your page there.
Okay.
Yeah. So in right there, in spring 2024, showed how many students participated
Oh,
and then
mhm.
surveyed. I don't know if there's deeper results that you can click onto from there.
Just in 23, they gave more of a summary of what they were looking for, what they found.
I know I was,
24, yeah.
yeah, I know I was looking through all the links, and it's quite extensive, you know, as far as you can look at the survey and give, but it wouldn't allow us to get any results for other schools or anything like that was password protected or.
You'll get your
Yeah.
own results.
Right,
You get
okay.
a comparable.
Okay.
So it wouldn't say, here's how you did compared to Genesis.
Sure.
But you might say, here's how you did compared to, similar districts,
Right,
and or all districts.
yeah,
Or maybe districts in Kent County,
Mhm.
or, district size of 5,000 kids or more, and things like that.
yeah, I think after looking at it and looking at all the links and stuff, I think it's a very good opportunity for us to get information, not only in our school, but on like schools, and especially with, you know, we've been talking about measurable goals and stuff. I think this might give us a starting point for a data point for that type of stuff.
Certainly
So-
surveying our staff, community, and our students, it doesn't hurt to
Right,
get
exactly,
information.
exactly. No, I think I'm very much in favor of that.
And I was able to do a comparison of the information collected in these surveys along with other best practice surveys that are available and out there through MDE and some other organizations, and the questions are all very, very similar.
Now, I have to ask a question. So we're getting this today, because you wanna go with it tomorrow, get started in March. How come, it seems like a last minute thing that's coming to us. What?
It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
We just know that, before we send out a lot of stuff, we like to share it for the board.
Okay.
I could have sent it to you in a weekly update and thought we could just discuss it
So
here.
you guys have been talking about this for a while?
We talked about it last year.
Okay, this
And
survey?
thought,
Okay,
we thought, no, we're in a point not doing it right now.
okay, okay.
And our school and district improvement process process has been strengthening and improving, and we're in more of a cycle now than we've been in the past. So we're really looking for something that can be repeated.
Okay,
And this feels like a really good resource for that. And, I just put tomorrow as the date for me to register with the, my student voice,
sure,
because then I can dig in deeper
okay.
and start to like really see more of the back end of the
Mhm.
survey rather than just what's available to the public. So,
Okay.
Would you give this the same year that you did the source survey?
So we
Is
talked
it
about
similar,
that,
right?
we'll probably take a year off,
Mhm.
because we'll do a source survey probably about the same time next year.
Mhm.
And so our data won't show trend data right away, but it'll still show data comparisons to others. And that might very well be 2 years on, 1 year off, 2 years on, and go from there. But to your other point, I don't wanna have survey exhaustion
No,
either, where we
that's
send
for
it back to
sure.
back and they have to answer similar questions. Again, we don't want everything.
No.
That was gonna be my question, how many other surveys are we, these are coming from each individual building,
Correct.
right? How many other surveys are we anticipating sending to parents and community members? And like, we got the bond stuff, probably, we got, is that something we need to think about or worry about, or?
Right now, not, I mean, similar surveys, yes. If they're completely different topics, I'm not as concerned. If we ask our, parents and our students, a lot of these questions every month or 3 times a year, that might look a little bit different. But if we switch from asking questions about climate and then move to questions about, yeah, about the bond, or about, we're gonna talk a little bit about sex ed advisory, that's another survey that's gonna go out. We had an MDE survey that goes out that we send out, so we have these once in a while, and it's traditionally we have about the same population of people. There's a group that love to fill them out, there's a group that will not fill them out, and there's a group that it depends on what's going on in their life. Some have a reason.
They all come from different sources too, usually, right, or not?
Define different sources.
Like, this one's gonna come from, so I'm gonna get this probably from Josh.
Yes, so
Right.
it's coming from a building, which is coming from the superintendent, so, or versus it's coming from the curriculum office, so source survey stuff comes from the superintendent.
Yep.
The sex ed advisory will come from the curriculum office, these will come from the building levels, and go from there, so there's a little bit of that also, you get it from the building principal, like, absolutely, let's fill it out, hey, and from the superintendent, delete it. So, I certainly understand that.
Yeah, and as important as trend data is, this is also a really good sort of litmus test for real-time collection of perception for buildings too. So it's a good chance for principals to see, like, how are our students feeling at Bauer right now? How is the staff feeling at Bauer right now, so they can adjust if needed to the results of that.
That's getting used to be way down on the end, away from the action. Tag in.
Who are
No.
you anyway?
Right,
Yeah. Where's your name tag?
Hanging out on the end. No, I love this, I think it's great, to the points have been made about just keeping a real-time pulse, not, because we referenced SOAR for like a year and a half, 2 years, and that's outdated by then, so I think this will be really helpful. My one question, 'cause there's great questions, and I know sometimes we get feedback, boy, who's gonna be looking at my answers? Are they gonna be able to track my answers? So, to put everybody's mind at ease, yeah, it comes from the building principal, but like, who gets the answers?
Yeah, so I think someone mentioned they tried to look at some things that were password protected, so there isn't any any identifiable information available publicly. There will be a group of administrators who have access to the results, and I don't know if that's been determined yet, who.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see aggregate data from your building grid level, you're not gonna be able to identify if it's a kid or.
Well, as a parent, I'm not putting like, it's Nick Bolheis filling this out for.
Only if, we have had that before, where it's completely anonymous and they still put their name in there. So it's up to the person that fills it out. Yep.
So, no, it's not, there's
We
no
have-
personal information.
I'm sure you have, I'm sure
available
you've
that
seen
you
it all.
need to give.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lynn.
Appreciate it.
Before we get into our next subject, the superintendent goals, I just want to preface it by reminding the board what's happened since our last meeting. On February 1st, I sent an email to everybody asking if they had anything else to add to what Dr. Vanderjack had presented us at our last meeting. And I asked you to respond one way or the other, and I want to thank everybody you for responding. There were only a couple of people that had some things that they wanted to add or consider adding. The rest of the board was happy with what they had seen there. I subsequently had a conversation with Dr. Vanderjack about that, and I also sent him some things this past, last week that I would like to see on there. One of the conversations that we had, between Dr. Vanderjack and myself were about the fact that, as he said to me, he said, I'm a very driven person. I like to get results, and his performance shows those type of things. So from a standpoint of, some of the goals that I suggested, some of the things that Dr. Vanderjack came up with, I feel like we started a little bit late this year. Next year, I'm gonna start this in November so that we're ready by January to close the door on that. But I also agree with the fact of what he was saying, how he's driven to succeed. I see that it would be a different story if we had a superintendent we felt like we had to really shepherd through the process of just being average. We don't have that here, okay? And that would be a whole different story as far as, what I was looking for from the superintendent to give us as far as these performance goals go. So, Doug, I'm very happy with the dialogue that we've had over the last couple of weeks. And so, I'll let you take it from there and then,
Sure. I'll just make a few comments. Some of these goals they're all driven from our strategic plan. The vision of the district really is the strategic plan. It's created from our community, from our staff, from our kids. So I think that's the direction. I think there are underlying things that are taking place throughout the district that warrant these goals to be on the forefront. Are these the only things we're working on? Clearly not. You heard from two other people, and it's a lot to oversee a large group of people. This is not a small district. That, quite frankly, when MASB puts their document out, they're talking about nearly 600 schools, and we're, one of the largest schools in the state. So
In the top 10%.
In the top, maybe in the top 5, right? So it's, yeah, so it's a different ship to maneuver. A lot of the accountability really comes from me making sure our staff is accountable. When I say our staff, I'll say leadership team. I would argue we have the strongest leadership team that I've ever worked with in my 34 years in education. So, and you can see the work. You're going to hear from a couple of them. You've already heard from a couple. You heard from another one tonight about the work that takes place. You've heard from others in the past. So I look at this a little bit differently when it comes to goals. About here should be on the forefront. I believe from the strategic planning standpoint. I also believe that we have different components within our cabinet members that I have in each component of our leadership team. So the first is about enhancing academic and assessment performance, and a lot of that comes into fruition because partially because of Bridges Math and the impact that's going to have. A lot of the conversations about accelerated math, which you're aware of, that we're looking at some things at the middle school, and that has to progress. But then not just saying we're done with that, that's great, but then measuring the metrics. So I put a completion date by December 2025, even though we'll know a lot more become from September moving forward. Those are the only, I think that's the only change I made to that goal.
Thank you for, if there's any, as you go through, if you could add what change you made, that'd help too, because.
Yeah, and the overarching was though, it would be really easy for me to just pick 2 of these and run with it, but I think our community needs to also know that it's a priority, in my opinion. But if you want different, I care, I'm not gonna argue. From the reorganization standpoint, you're hearing a lot about that tonight. That's a heavy lift. You don't see a major reorganization like this. I think the last major reorganization was when we had to shut down and go into COVID. And I didn't have time to make that goal, but clearly that was a priority of the district. Going to a 1-to-1 district was a big shift at that time. Now we're looking at another major reorganization to have a sustainable system to put in place. I've made a couple tweaks to the timeline at the bottom of that page, at the bottom of that goal, going from there, but really looking at trying to clean up this whole process so that we have a sustainable, so that not only from a district standpoint and a teacher standpoint, but from those that are impacted by these positions, they need to know that their positions, now that they're moving into, are sustainable also. We are not looking at a you know, when we first started this, and Ann's gonna go into this in more detail, when we first started this, it was a 2 years and then we won't have the funding to do it. We don't wanna say, this is our 2-year plan and then we're gonna come back and do this again. None of us, wanna do this again. So we'd like to have something that's sustainable moving forward, going from there. So the timeline, for completion, and that is the first day of school, if you don't have it on your calendar. Yeah. It'll be, well, the reason I say it'll be done by then, cause the kids will show up on that day, and that's when it needs to be done, right at the end, it needs to be done. Moving into, student services, we talked diversity and advocacy. That still maintains the same. There was one adjustment to the goal. If you look at the analyzed feedback, there was a question about, is it just exited students or transient students? I changed it to current and exited students because it's not just, as you heard from Lindsay, about getting feedback from our current students. We also want to gather feedback by those that have left. It's a lot different if you have 20 students that leave your district when 19 of them, their parents got a new job, versus 19 of them because of a situation that happened or something like that. So gather that feedback. I also talked to a board member that says, can we look at that data in the fall at least to hear more about it? Not a particular student, but trend stuff. So those conversations I think need to take place. That was a great question about how can we then say, what does that data look like so that the board can say, listen, we lost 19 kids and here's, not the kid, but here's what happened going from there. So while working on getting that stuff together too. And then the facilities planning, really the timeline overhauled on that one at the bottom, because since this was a draft, we've already started the first meeting to have these conversations. So I cleaned up the timeline with Mr. Briggs, working with his department, and said, here's where we are with the scope. I'm gonna say, if you look, there's an interesting component to that last goal. It goes back to, let's see, the fifth bullet from the bottom. It goes from September until June of 26. So just so you know, that doesn't mean come December, we're done, you wipe your hands. It just goes into a different phase. So that's a longer one, but I still want to put in there so you can understand how long it takes to develop this work and going from there. But the goal is to get this, the feedback component finalized. Quite frankly, going back to the survey component, we'd like to finalize this information before we get into strategic planning, so they're not running in parallel to each other with survey exhaustion, because they are completely different questions that we're asking. But having said that, our SOAR survey that we send out can also help inform regarding the direction of this work that's listed as a goal. Does that make sense? Did I know we talked a lot about things, Mr. Chancey, did I get the plane closer to landing?
Right, and I also one of the things that I suggested to Dr. Vanderjack under the goal 2 for district reorganization, you know, when we're looking at measurable stuff, the reduction that they came up with based on the dollars that we had to work with and the things that they felt were most important, I think that in and of itself is a measurable goal that, you know, you could say, listen, we had the funding for, instead of 17 positions, for 17 minus X positions. And this is what we went through, this is why we did it. And so I would look at that as a situation where one could say, yeah, we lost, you know, X number of positions, or one could say, we were told there was gonna be no funding at all, and so we're really 10 positions above where we thought we might have been under the 2 or 3 years ago. So I think right there we've got a measurable component right there also. But yes, you've addressed my feedback, and I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any other comments or considerations?
The only comments I have, and they really need to be in a smart format if we follow the superintendent evaluation tool. So the goal, we'll just do district reorganization. That's not a smart goal like they want on the tool. And then we have superintendent's plan to accomplish the goal. Those are all your activities, and it says results focused. Goals should measure outcomes, not activities. So for me, these are not smart goals. But I'm just looking at the tool, and I'm just very comfortable with SMART goals because that's what I'm required to do for work. so.
Yeah, there's, no one has to make any excuse for what they're asking for,
Yeah, I
anything like
just-
that. Now, Dr. Vanderdeck, when we talked about that last week, you had said something to me about the SMART goals, can you,
Yeah, so I think it looks different. I know as a classroom teacher, I had the same thing. When I was a building principal, we had the same thing. Because of the size of the organization, it looks different for me, in my opinion. And, you know, I know MASB has recommended, they recommended about student growth, and that's no longer even a component. So I don't know if that page is still valid, that MASB hasn't redefined. I don't know. I know from a school improvement, we identify SMART goals in our buildings, because that's how they write their SMART goals. But I also think from a district standpoint, I just think it looks different. I think from our team standpoint, I think it makes sense. I think from a superintendent standpoint, I think it's an overarching theme of the expectations that you would have as a board.
and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna follow up with the MASB, with not only your questions and concerns, but also your response. And ask them when was the last time they reevaluated that part of the tool there, and,
I just know last year the tool was still current, and, I see his face, and I can't remember his name.
Jay?
Yeah, Jay.
Mhm.
He said, you know, really, one or two goals, and he didn't specify like Sun City District. This is a tool that's universally used. So, for me, very much results focus. Goals should measure outcomes, not activities, and I see a lot of activities, but I don't necessarily see what is the outcome that's expected. What's the outcome that we're looking for? So that's just my feedback,
Mhm.
and I had shared that
Right.
previously,
Yep,
so that's
I-
not a surprise.
Mhm. Anybody else have any comments or discussion?
I just, to reinforce, I think, you know, there's 539 districts in the state, and they range from a couple hundred kids to 20,000 kids, in Utica or something like that. And, I appreciate MESB's, focus on SMART goals. I think that there are districts where they're trying to figure out if they're gonna replace a boiler, you know, next year or not. We are not that. We are a higher performing district, and really, these, I get the whole SMART goal thing. I actually think there are activities and outcomes that are baked in here. So I think that they're in there, and, I think that, I'm glad we have 4 goals. We want to push ourselves as a district. We expect a lot from our superintendent and the team, and so I'm glad we're doing that. I think that these are goals, but they're more than goals. They're a communication from the superintendent to the district and to the staff about, this is what's important to us. Academic excellence is important to us. So I would be, I am reticent to have a specific goal, well, we will achieve this, because that's not big and broad enough to push the district forward, and what we want is our superintendent holding the district forward, and not the board having to push the district or the superintendent forward. So I think I think my experience, myself and working with other executives, this is very much in the context of executive SMART goals that we should have, and executive directional goals, direction that we should have in the district. I think it's a junior level, you know, principal, nothing against junior level principals, but if it's that, you want specific SMART goals. For an executive, in an organization, in a school, you want directional, broad, here's where we're gonna go, and I think he's achieved it.
I can definitely see areas in which, you know, we're in, you know, budget crisis and there's some threshold of, we have to cut so much money, it's like, all right, that's something where it looks different.
Right.
We lost 400 kids, this year as a district. That's something that I think is a different, when things are, when we're doing a lot of things well, the question is, how do we keep moving forward? I think this gives us a good vision for moving forward.
You know, Ken, I completely agree with what you just said about the types of things that we would look to gauge Dr. Vanderjack's performance on. The fact that, I said it at the time, that whole tool that we used last year, you know, to go through I thought that was a mid-level manager type of scenario. It really didn't encompass a leadership position, and I thought that was kind of, you know, it's almost kind of predetermined what was gonna happen. And as Dr. Vanderjagt said to me during one of our discussions, he said, I want to excel at what I'm doing, and basically, that thing is made to make the average person average, in my opinion, you know, and to protect those who aren't performing. So, you know, I thought that was kind of a waste in and of itself, but what we have is what we have. And also what we have, I think, is a superintendent who's looking to excel at everything that he does, and I appreciate that, so. Anybody else? All set? Okay, let's
Thanks,
see.
Doug.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sex Education Advisory Board membership timeline.
So I'm gonna, Amy's not feeling well, and I'd rather have her not feel well, not here.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So, a lot of these things you're hearing from are things that, was a scramble today to make sure I got all the, so I'm gonna do the best I can, so if there's questions, won't hesitate to get it back to you, but, so I will say this is a timeline we've spent a lot of time, Amy and I, working on this, so this is a timeline that we're to the time of year where we wanna survey our parents. Two things, number one, we wanna get information regarding where they want things to be taught, so that the Sex Ed Advisory Board can meet, and I know Dr. Hooper's been in this, that board before she was on this board. So she understands how this process works, where they get together and they say, okay, we need feedback so we can have, some quality discussion on any changes that we're gonna recommend to the Board of Education. Along with that, at the end of the survey, we ask if you're interested in serving in some capacity, because we are, by law, required to have students, parents with kids in the district, parents without, staff members, but they can't all be staff members that have kids in the district, you can't, and administrators in that committee. So we need a list of people. You can imagine the kids that were on it have graduated. And there's one left, but two have graduated, so we gotta search for kids, and go that route, go for that. A lot of that will work through the high school, but then we work with getting feedback. So you can see the timeline, get the parent survey out, beginning of March. That gives then we have the list, then there's the application. So now Mr. Bohai says, you know what, I'm interested. So we're like, all right, we're gonna send you a follow-up survey, and he's like, I'm not interested anymore, I don't wanna fill out another survey. So we go from 90 people down to maybe 40 people, and then they have a whole list of what they fill out, and then there's a rubric that is in there that you can see what is used to identify who is recommended. This whole process gets all the way down so that we can do this by the June board meeting, so that the board is required to take action on the membership for the Sex Ed Advisory. Then they would take action on that going from there. And then that committee can meet by law twice a year. I think they meet 3 times, but they have to meet at least twice. Next year, we'll go from there. So that's a huge summary. It's consistent with everything we've done in the past. There is nothing new except the timeline. I will say that when I say we, with all due respect, Mr. Briggs, when many of us got here 7 years ago, they hadn't done the survey for years, and then the committee had not met. So we need to make sure we got, so now I think we've got them on they've been consistently meeting for the past 5 years. Even during COVID, they were meeting, going from there. So you'll recall the last major change we had was probably the year before COVID. But then after that, there's a lot of times there's recommendations. You saw the video?
Yeah.
That we recommended, the updated video from the VHS to an actual, video that they could watch and use.
From the 90s to the
Yeah.
2010s.
Exactly.
Do you know how many?
Again, these are not recommendations for any curriculum changes, this is just getting the committee together. Yeah.
Any idea of what kind of vacancies we currently have?
Nope.
Okay. That's-
I know there's some students, I know there's a couple of parents that no longer have kids in the district. I know one of our, I believe the clergy member is not in the same, is still in church and in the district, just a different congregation. So that would be okay. I think the co-chair might, and the co-chair might stay the same. It's gotta be a non-employee co-chair. And that shifted last year, so that could be the same, unless they've requested to be off. Go from there.
Who reviews the rubrics for membership?
The co-chair and the,
Co-chair.
yeah, if they're the same, if not, the people that are on there review it, or just Amy does. It's pretty straightforward, you can tell who really wants to and who doesn't, and a lot of times they fill out the survey, So Mr. Bolheis is gonna say, I'm interested, he's gonna fill out the survey, then you call him up, he's like, I
I don't
didn't
know
know
what
you
I
met
was
at
thinking,
7 o'clock at night, I don't know.
Yeah, you know me too well, I'm all fired up at the beginning.
So, and it's been pretty, and it's a good group, a wide range of people get together, good time.
Some of those questions, like, I was looking at, for the membership
Yeah.
survey, there's a question that says, when should information about contraception be taught? You know, if somebody says elementary, right, and somebody else says it shouldn't be taught, how does that factor in the decision as to whether or not the member should be on the committee?
So there's a rubric, it's in there.
Like, does the answer to that question, is there a right or wrong answer there, I guess?
I think they use that data to, kind of like we did with the diversity advocacy. We said, okay, so there's this group of people who feel strongly it should be elementary, these people feel strongly not at all. So how can we make sure we have some of both represented on the committee?
Got it.
And that's kind of how the.
Yeah, you don't want everybody on the committee that thinks that third graders should be taught contraception.
Got it.
Or fourth graders.
So it's not the, got
To balance it out.
Yeah, my main question, all the questions are the same as we've always given.
It's just time.
Yeah, everything was well laid out, I feel like going through it, I understand where you're headed and so.
Questions?
Good overview. There you go.
Thanks. Look at me now.
Amy?
Thanks.
Tell Amy she prepped you well.
I'll tell her. Scrambling. All right, trip request, this is our band for the state finals, in Detroit. It's an overnight trip, so it's the same request we've had for years. Fortunately, we've asked them to fill it out, with plenty of time. So we actually got this in the day after our last the day of our last work session. I said, we're not changing the agenda. So he'll be happy to know that, that we'll bring this to the next board meeting on the consent agenda. Any questions about, if you're ever interested in going to Detroit, just let me know.
This is the first time I've seen one of these,
Yeah.
so he ballparks the number of kids, and it looks like there'll be an overage, then that would just go to the boosters, is that right?
It could go to the boosters, it depends on how it breaks down, but yes, a lot will change in the fall when we find out how many kids are actually.
Okay,
in
so
the
this is just kind of
program.
ballpark.
Yeah, you need to have a general idea of what we're doing. If it's gonna cost the kids about $130 to go, and it turns out to be $1,300, you would wanna know there's a difference.
Yeah.
So if it is vastly different, we'll come back anyway, because we'll have other requests for purchases of stuff.
Yeah, okay, thanks, yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, I think we're ready to go on to our next, item, the MTSS redesign.
Thanks, so I do have to say that, give me a minute to plug in here, but, the amount of work that has gone into this has been, enormous. Not necessarily, there's just so many factors to it, there's so many, there's just so many components, there's so many layers to it. So there's all the work that took place on that back end with meetings with staff, with administration. I can tell you that our cabinet team has discussed this for well over probably a year and a half, because every year we had to make decisions about, we knew this was going to be done. The COVID dollars were not gonna last forever. We've had discussions as a board. This is a 2-year that was stretched. We did the best we can. And the hard part is you have amazing staff doing amazing work with our kids, and that we have to make some changes. So we wanna make it sustainable. We've gone, I think, 5 or 6 iterations of trying to do this. We've looked at several different components. We've looked at other districts and what they're doing. But we wanna find what's right for your district too, for your team, for where your strengths are. So I'm gonna ask Ann to go through and give kind of a summary of kind of where we, I would say, ended up, and kind of lead us into what we have moving forward with communication going from there.
Thank you, and I know that some of you have discussed this with already, but, you know, back in 2021, when we first started talking about ESSER dollars, 11T, and probably more grants that I'm not thinking of, and really talking and digging in with the building administration of where we should go, this was already on my mind. You know, these are people's livelihoods, these are, you know, passions that people have, and so I, really don't take this lightly. Nor do I think anyone, part of the team or administration do. So, there you go. So I think the biggest thing that I just wanna cover first is why. Why do we have to restructure? You have heard from our MTSS, specialists, both the PBIS and the instructional side, and you've been impressed. You've, sat here and listened and like, this is great work, I love what you guys are doing, and now here I am saying, and we're gonna change it. But there's a reason behind that. So back in 21, 22, when, especially when we added a PBIS person to every single building, and we also added the instructional side. I'm gonna just tell you, I'm gonna use the term MTSSA and MTSSB, because that's what we've been calling it. When we added that, we were very transparent with the staff and said, this is a 2-year job. This is a 2-year job. And the one thing that I've really, really appreciated, because I have met with 20 of the 21 staff members that this impacts, and I sat with them individually for more than an hour, and then had follow-up meetings with them, and they have been very understanding of, Ann, I knew this was coming. You're moving my cheese, and absolutely. So I completely understand that. So anyway, let me just start with telling you the why. So we really, really need to go back to that 2021 year when we started making some of these decisions, and talk about, like, if you looked at those job descriptions, you're gonna see terms like recovery of learning. You're gonna see COVID listed in those job descriptions. You're gonna see ESSER and 11T, listed in those. And those aren't there anymore. And the restrictions and the requirements when we wrote those job descriptions and we created this work were very, I'm gonna say, like, they had very strict lane lines, And by us not having those restrictions anymore and being able to pivot the funding into the general fund, we're able to now open up the work that these jobs are able to do. So when you see the word flexibility, that's what we mean. I remember, sitting up on the stage, in Eagle Auditorium and talking about these positions and saying, kind of frustration of, what do you mean they could only target these students? But the truth was, it was recovery of learning, and they could only target these students. Where now, with the flexibility of the positions and, the work that we've done to say, no, we can put them out of, these pots of monies, we're able to really lift those limitations and create more flexibility of who can benefit from all this great work. And then finally, it's continuation of all the amazing work that you continually get to see and be presented, and to have those high academic, outcomes, and to see the growth that we see in the kids in their, the whole child. And that's what the whole restructure is trying to maintain. Dr. Vanderjack and I went out and we talked to all of the buildings last year, and then we've worked with the building administration, and what they wanted to see is a continuation of the great work. And we didn't want it to fall all back on the classroom teacher. The classroom teachers are doing amazing Tier 1 work. The Tier 1 work is the base of the pyramid for MTSS. And that's what we want to sustain. And so what you'll see in the restructure is that our Tier 1 work has been going on for the past 4 years, and we're seeing great strides in the classroom. So we want to continue on with those Tier 2 and 3 supports, so that our classroom teachers and our students and our administration have the support to continue everything that we're doing. And we had to do it with the restructure, and we had to, save some FTE so we can have a continuation. I'm not looking at anyone and saying, this is a 2-year job anymore. In fact, I've had that conversation 20 times. And how long is this job? Well, last time I was real honest, wasn't I? And I said it was a 2-year job. this time I'm not saying anything, right? So at least for me, this is the plan, this is what we're doing, And so that's where you're going to see, where we've structured it. Okay, so we broke it up into kind of 3 areas. The first one is going to be pre-K 5 focused and facing. What you'll see is that we have redesigned those MTSS A and B positions that are at the elementary schools to go into these kind of 3 layers. So I do want to say that this is a visual for coverage, not necessarily for hierarchy, okay? I didn't know how else to do it, so, but somebody was like, is that a hierarchy type thing? And no, it's a coverage of buildings, okay? So you'll see those kind of pinkish squares, I hope no one's colorblind up there. But the ones that are 9 across and they have A, B, F, G, those are all the elementary buildings, including the 5-6. And we are restructuring the positions to be called a student support specialist. And later in our agenda tonight, you'll see that we have that as one of the job descriptions. And a student support specialist is going to take, I've been using this analogy, I collect antique milk bottles. And you know the old milk bottles that have the cream, like the bubble for the cream on the top? So that's kind of what I feel like MTS A and B originally were, but if you keep those jobs in a building for 4 years, they're gonna fill that whole bottle of milk, right? But we tried to take the cream, the really good stuff, the stuff that we know that's making really big differences and impacts, and we combined that from the MTSS-A and the MTSS-B position, and we have put it not only in those pink jobs, but also in all of our work, okay? So, so those student support specialists are going to be supporting the tier 2 and 3 work, both behavior and instructionally, okay? They also are going to take the work of, being to have a little bit more leadership within the building as far as direct impact on paraprofessionals, community facing, parent facing, but really mainly student facing, okay? The next kind of coverage you see is the job that we already have. Those are their instructional coaches. You have met them before, currently like Laura Beckett is an instructional coach, okay? And so those instructional coaches, right now, we have 4 instructional coaches. 1 is targeted for elementary, 1 is targeted for secondary, 1 is targeted for pre-K math, and 1 is targeted for instructional technology. So what we are going to reallocate and restructure is we're gonna have an additional 1 targeted to elementary. And we're moving both of these into the elementary buildings. And that, because access to our instructional coaches has been maybe a little bit of a frustration between teachers and administrators. So we really want them to have access. So we're gonna place 1 in one of the north side buildings, but then they'll cover the north side buildings. And then we'll put another in the south side buildings, and they'll cover the south side buildings. And I know that doesn't match up with my, that doesn't match. I just noticed that, but you get what I mean. So it's gonna be kind of 4 and 4. And then, and their purpose is not only to do professional development at tier 1 levels in the classroom with teachers and our new staff, but also to help with principals that want to do professional development with their staff within their early releases or their staff meetings, once a month and things like that. So we're very excited about that and the access that will come to teachers. And then that kind of next layer, that is, this next position is primarily elementary facing, but it will have roles for the whole district. And this, we're gonna call it a student services, service facilitator, and there's a job description for you to look at later with that as well. And this position, when we talk with parents, when we talk with staff at the elementaries, we just feel that we need more support with 504s. As a former middle school principal, I will tell you, when I received 4 elementary schools and 4 different principals writing 504s, and all the families that those are impacting, there's a little bit of discrepancy. So we think having kind of an overarching, kind of equality type of look at the 504s and ensuring that, you know, it doesn't matter if you go to this school versus this school, that, you know, the same language and the same communications being had with students, we think is really good. Also, oversight of those mental health therapists and Arbor Circle partnerships that we already have in place. And obviously restorative practices, you've heard of that, trauma-informed practices that we've talked about for the last several years. Kind of an overarching K-12 responsibility of professional development to our staff, and trying to really build the capacity of not just our administrators, but then also all support staff, you know, security staff that, you know, talks with students all the time, with the, you know, tier 1, and then also those tier 2 and 3 behaviors as well. And again, we really want access to this person, so this person will, we put Jamestown lower because that's kind of how Mandy and I talked about what elementary school would be a good, you know, so we think the office, Pete didn't seem to mind, you know, that the office would be in Jamestown lower, but, you know, that's something that can always be discussed. So that is the restructure for elementary. Should I pause and have any questions or not?
Yeah, I just wanna clarify, and I
Yeah.
think I might have seen this in the job description.
Yep.
So your top 2, your student support specialists and your instructional coaches
Mhm.
are more or less under curriculum Amy, that area, correct, or not?
No, not necessarily. Instructional coaches, yes. That is, that would be what I would consider tier 1 learning. But those student support specialists actually will fall under student services, which is Mandy. Kathy, who is our NTSS coordinator, that job is still gonna be there, but instead of probably a direct report to Amy, her direct report will be Mandy. Because if you think about student services, student services are those additional services for students to succeed in the classroom and be successful, right? So they're more those tier 2 and 3,
True, yeah.
you know, programs. Tier 1 is what we want every single kid to have access to every single day, and 80% of all of our kids, you know, are caught in that net. And then we're gonna dive down deeper. So that's why we're kind of doing a little bit of a shift within direct oversight of those decisions. So you'll see Kathy go over under student services.
And same thing then with the student services facilitator with the 504s, that's under
That's
you
under
as
me.
well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How many 504s are there?
288,
How many?
is that right? Did I just interrupt you, sorry?
No, I was gonna say Mandy, but you know.
288.
The last we checked, it was 288.
Who's currently handling all the responsibilities of the student services facilitator?
Principals, at least for 504.
Yeah, principals are handling a lot of it.
But there's a lot
Some
of
of it's going
it.
through Mandy's department, some of it's throughout, but I think that was the biggest ask from our principals. If you look at this structure from where we are right now, going back to the whole federal dollars are down, 9 positions were at stake of being eliminated. We felt that if we eliminated all 9, we had to restructure all of them, and we had to bring back some to support the services that we no longer needed. So we are not asking to combine 2 jobs into 1. We are asking one person to do the work, and there are components that we pulled out, have other people do. So I'll say you get rid of 9 to add 2.5. Is maybe another way to look at it. And part of that is trying to streamline elementary 504, which are substantially different than secondary. So Ann's gonna address secondary in a minute, but you'll see the difference between the 2. So instead of one person trying to oversee, which every building principal then would have to go to a 504 meeting, have one person do it so that they can oversee it, attend, build consistency so we know there's common language, expectations, and communication as kids progress through our system year after year. Does that answer a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the role, but there's like, I'm just wondering, who's overseeing the mental health therapist in the Arbor Circle partnership right now?
I am,
You are.
yeah. Melissa Bernard also has a role in overseeing Section 504 currently. She does not have the ability to attend 504 meetings across the district, so I think this position will really be a partner to to her position, which is titled Student Services Coordinator. I think Melissa has a great depth of expertise in this area and can provide a lot of, like, district procedural, expectations, but I think the facilitator role will be able to be more, at the ground level in the meetings at the elementary level to support that consistency.
Yeah, for sure. And then who's doing the district-wide restorative practices and trauma-informed practice right now?
That's been a team effort.
Yeah.
Thus far, we have had our district behavior coaches participate in that, we've had our PBIS specialists participate in training, and as much as we can, we try to do train-the-trainer model to spread that knowledge, but
And what does that look
Yeah.
right now? Like, you can easily say we got 288 504s. Like, I'm
yeah.
just trying to think of this one person. What are we gonna ask them to
Yeah,
bite off if they're gonna handle it for the whole district?
sure, so they,
It's not the whole district, it's elementary.
right,
Well, I mean,
Some of it is whole district, some is
I'm
just
building
elementary.
it.
Yeah.
Aaron building, so that's a lot.
yeah. I think that there is a shared partnership at all times with 504 because not everybody can be at every meeting. And so at the elementary level, our building principals serve as the 504 coordinators for their building. And they can have a range of 2 to 12 kids in their building with 504 plan. At the secondary level, our counselors are doing that coordination for section 504. And so allowing Melissa's position to be more centrally located to the secondary gives that whole counseling team added support. So we're looking to both support the principals at the elementary level because they've been maintaining that, and then the counselors at the secondary role. So the facilitator position would be new, but it would be it'd be taking a whole level of coordination off of what's currently a shared partnership between Melissa and the building principal. Yeah, Anne will speak more to this, but what you'll see both for student services and the special education facilitator roles is they have parts of their role that are defined specific to either elementary or secondary, and then parts of their role that are K-12. So the part of this role that's K-12 responsibility is the restorative practices, which we really like to see embedded in our current in-school suspension areas. That's the most applicable places that we can have that. And so that person also has a point of contact with the secondary level in the people who are directly interfacing with students who we want to try to talk about how do we make amends, how do we, restore the plan, so.
And this is maybe skipping ahead too much to like the job descriptions, which I think are the last item. But I know
No, we can talk about that now.
terms matter, how we, director versus facilitator and all of that. Melissa's not a facilitator right now. So I don't know that it really matters, but just like, so this is gonna be a facilitator, but she's gonna be he or she will be a peer of Melissa.
She has a little bit different role when it comes to Title IX too, so that's why this job looks different than her job, but they both have a similar component, but.
I would, yeah, and I would also say that Melissa would have more oversight as a coordinator because of her.
And then we're just using Melissa because she's in the spot right now.
Yeah, well,
Just like
let's
the
just say
position. Yeah.
student service coordinator.
Yeah.
Say Melissa, gets my job, and, we hire that, later down the road. I would say that, that student service coordinator does have more oversight, due to the McKinney-Vento K-12 aspect of that role, which I, can talk about later. Also due to the Title IX, coordination and the role that all entails.
Yeah.
And so, I know, I will say that, 7 years ago, when, I started, their director, we have all kinds of directors.
Yeah.
I would say that have different roles, so I always talk about, oversight and kind of like, where's that? And, a facilitator to me, is someone that is going to have oversight, but at the same time, they will always kind of acquiesce to what the building principal or, to Mandy.
Yeah.
Or, sorry, the student
Yeah,
services.
no, that's helpful. I just,
This is,
again, really complex and like, I'm not a titles guy at all, but I know like from an upward mobility standpoint,
Mhm.
it's a big deal to serve people, so like.
Says the president. Well, there are there are parallels and there's hierarchy, and there's a difference between
Yeah,
some of them. You have a principal and assistant principal, both have discipline, responsibilities in their job descriptions, but one clearly has additional job descriptions than the other, change the title.
Yeah, and so I think, Enid, you mentioned for the 9 student support specialists, did you say something about we want them to take on like added leadership or visibility?
Yeah,
Did I hear
so
that
if
right?
you look at some of the things that are, so currently our MTSS A and B positions, because we knew that they were going to be limited, 2-year positions, we kept them under what I would say the teacher contract.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, but very specifically, we have contract language that talks about oversight and talks about a daily schedule, like, a start time and an end time, and it has a very defined calendar. And these positions, because of the work that we see and everything involved to, we see the need for before school, after school, oversight of kids, or meetings that we can finally all get to really fast so that we can talk about things, phone calls that you can now make to the parents, now that you're not being, pulled 1,000 ways. Maybe some conversations, tougher conversations that you have to have with parents, or tougher conversations you might have to have with support staff. So all that, I would say, is not something that is a responsibility of a teacher,
Under a teacher contract.
under a teacher contract.
Yeah.
And so by creating the student support specialist, moving some of these duties outside the teacher contract, then I would say the oversight is what we can have in there.
Got it.
So how
Yeah.
many of these jobs have names on them right
Like people?
now? Yeah,
Oh,
Tonight, none.
okay.
well, no, that's not true, because
Well,
I
that's-
would
that's
say
true.
an instructional coach, we have 4 instructional coaches, but we have 2 openings. So,
So only the 4 are eligible to bid on those jobs?
no.
Okay.
We've had elementary and secondary, we're adding one of each.
Mhm.
2 are identified, 2 are not.
Right.
That makes sense?
Right.
And she let her maybe do the secondary and then maybe.
Yeah, no, yeah, we got, yeah.
I love it. Okay, let's keep going.
We may have gotten a few phone calls the last few weeks.
Well,
Really?
I'm anxious to answer those questions so that hopefully you can have those conversations. But I will tell you this: I also have had phone
sure
calls,
you
but
have.
mine are with the people that it really, really directly affects. And my goal was to bring those people. I always say from a 10 to an 8 for anxiety. And I had the sweetest email from one of them that says, "Don't worry, and I'm at a 5." And I was like, "Yes,
Yeah.
you're doing good."
What
Yeah,
prescription?
honestly,
Yeah.
I will say I've had conversations with some of the people on the top row, very gracious.
Yeah.
I have not had any, coming at, they wouldn't come to me anyway.
Yeah.
But concern. But I would say, what we're discussing, and I know you didn't mean it the way you just said it, because it does impact everybody. It impacts every classroom, and I think that is the,
Yeah.
some of the sentiment I've gotten is, yeah, it does impact those, certain positions directly, because that's their job.
I think it impacts them as a teacher in their classrooms whenever support systems change. Even as a building principal, when you get a new superintendent, or as a teacher, you get a new principal, that changes. However, I think to be fair, the people that are directly impacted by not working in the capacity they worked with in the past is some of those most difficult conversations.
Totally,
Yeah.
I can
And
appreciate that.
I really, I can't reiterate enough, and so I really apologize that that was taken as any, light.
No, yeah.
Because
As I say, I know you-
when Dr. Vanderjack and I went and we spoke with the buildings, this was a huge red flag. This was a very big concern of everybody. And I know that the work I've done with Becky and Brad over the last couple of years, and now Mike and Kathy, this is a big concern of all of ours. We want people to feel supported. And there are so many things, even just talking just now about the student support facilitator, looking at some of the duties and kind of like what you said, well, who does that now? I want to reiterate, some of those things didn't even, 5 years ago, when we made these jobs, that didn't exist. This is where we are now. And so when we look at these supports, these are people, But we have so many more supports too for our teachers that we aren't naming in this because of the great work we've done with PLCs, because of the great work we've done with teacher time, because of the great work that we're doing at elementary with SOAR, just like where we are with PBIS, you know, with tier 1. I mean, that just in itself is so amazing, you know? So I just wanna say that the last thing any of us wanna do is to add more to people's plate. Cause I don't know about you guys, I can't take anymore. And we know they can't. So another word that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I really wanna say it, is that we're owning the word de-implementation too. You know? Cause remember that milk bottle that I was talking about? There really shouldn't be any more milk underneath it. Like, we just want the, because that stuff is what's the best stuff. And we have a staff of, like, just tremendous overworkers, you know? And as much as we tell them to slow it down, they just are amazing. And so we know that we are also, on top of restructuring, are gonna have to start de-implementing some things so that it just doesn't keep filling and filling.
And please, I can only imagine the work that y'all, because this impacts every single one of you in the campus. So please don't take my questions
Oh,
as
no,
like
not
I'm
at all.
criticizing or second guessing. I'm just trying to understand,
No.
like I understand the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we've had to do things in my career where, yeah, priorities change, resources change, and you have to make tough choices. I totally understand that. I just wanna ask the questions I need to
No,
ask.
I'm
too.
glad you
I
are,
understand.
and I just don't wanna say something that then someone's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you haven't said that. Like, I take this-
if you did.
Here, thank you.
It's recorded, so.
Because you know me, I just say it, so, okay. Okay, so let's
Thank you.
talk
Thank you.
about a little bit of the secondary, because secondary is a little different of the conversation, because, and, secondary doesn't like when I say this, but they do have an assistant principal, they do have counselors, they do have security, you know what I mean? So when we were talking about a restructure and trying to maintain all the great work that we're doing, we also had that kind of to work with versus like an elementary principal that, there they are, you know? So, when we sat down and really talked, once again, this is a visual, not a hierarchy. But one of the things that the high school started, back in 2020, or 21-22, when we were like, hey, do you want a PBIS specialist, you know, type of work, they said, you know, actually that doesn't really fit where we're at, but what we really love, and they named it ALC, which is the Alternative Learning Center, was basically in-school suspension or detention. And what we noticed is that our suspension numbers went down because we put a teacher in there. More importantly, remember how I said there's things that exist now that didn't exist 5 years ago? Well, one of them is the risk assessment and the BTAM process, which now just passed by legislation that we have to use it. So, and if you go,
behavior threat assessment.
sorry, yes, you know, one of those
It was
acronyms.
in one of the board meetings,
Yeah.
but now at least
Yeah,
we throw acronyms around.
And I apologize.
So.
but, so within that behavior threat, what's the name? Assessment, okay, manager, that says you can't send them home. You know, like they need, like if you're fearful of something, we wanna keep eyes on them. And so really, this is starting to be a necessity. And then when we think about the great work that we're trying to do within restorative practices, it's to keep kids in school. So that was a really, a thing that our principals were like, hey, we would love if there's a possibility to have ALC, you know, in our buildings. And I would say Riley and Baldwin and the 5-6 building had all been trying to piece together, you know, a little bit of that with, you know, trying to keep kids, you know, in the office with somebody or whatever. But at the same time, as far as suspension, they don't suspend as high numbers in the middle schools. So they said, you know, we could get by if we had a para-professional that was instead of a teacher. So that's why you'll see a dark green is the ALC that we already have, so that's, you know, that's gonna stay. And then the light green, those are paraprofessionals that we're going to add at 35 hours a week so that they can be there from the start of day to the end of the day, do some of those really great check-in, check-out, you know, restorative practices, and then also work through restorative practice to get kids back into class. Like, you know, oh, you are not doing what you need to do in this class, but maybe we can still save your day and get you back into class later in the day. Or, nope, you made a mistake, you're gonna not be able to go to class for 2 or 3 days, but you're gonna go to ALC instead. So that is something that we are restructuring for the middle schools. We're also, like I said earlier, adding that instructional coach to the secondary level. We haven't really had discussion if, you know, one's gonna be at the high school and one's gonna be split between the 2 middle schools, if one's gonna be at one middle school, or, you know, I don't know. So we'll land there when we can, but they're gonna be, you know, facing the, same type of work, working with teachers directly for tier 1 instruction, working with new staff, and working with principals for their professional development. And then, the special education facilitator is going to be there to, help attend and support with IEPs. One of the things that stood out drastically when we talked to the principals and we talked to the staff was our principals are in meetings a lot. They're in a lot of meetings. And we have been very cognizant of their time in meetings because of that, and tried to restructure some things so that we're not pulling them out from meetings. But IEP meetings, I mean, there's a lot to that, and especially in the secondary level, probably 500 IEPs.
How many IEPs do we have? 13?
In the district, we have 1,100.
Right. So anyway, it's a lot of meetings, you know? And so this is, I will say, the one position that, we do require that the person either have or is willing to get their administration certification, because if you're the district representative in an IEP, you have to have that. And out of those 21 people that we're restructuring, we have several that do have it, okay? So this position, I would say, again, secondary facing primarily. They will attend IEP meetings as well as support co-teaching. The state model also is really, for inclusivity, is really encouraging co-teaching, more so even than a resource model. Like an hour of resource versus like being in there with your gen. And I was at Howell for 10 years, that's all I co-taught like 3 of my, 5 hours, and it was great. So, anyway, and then district-wide, they're gonna be, a lead with paraprofessional training for both special ed, and, like those, like behaviors. And then, they're gonna also be the district homebound and hospitalization liaison. And so their primary location is gonna be either at Baldwin or Riley.
So question at this level, if I remember right, when we put in all the PBIS people at the elementary levels, I know one of the things that we talked about that was missing to some degree was that proactive approach for behavior issues. And I know you talked about restorative practices, that's typically after something happens, right? So are there other things that we put in place that are proactively dealing with behavior issues? And where would that fall then within the reorganized structure of the FTSS and everything else?
So that's SOAR. So, our, why am I drawing a blank at SOAR? It's
Be safe.
be safe, own it, act responsibly, and be respectful. So that is all throughout our district. That's on our buses, that's in the hallways, that's everywhere. And so all levels, especially the elementaries, that's that tier 1 teaching. And like, we have come very, very far since 2019 with that. And that, like I said, that's gonna catch 80% of the behaviors, either positively, growing like the good behaviors, having standard, behaviors that we wanna see in the cafeteria, or we wanna see, and that has just flourished in the last 5 years.
And also, we'll say that if you backslide the elementary, you don't have to, but the people on the top, those people, the school support, they're helping create a lot of those lessons that are incorporated into the classroom. We talked about that at our last meeting, with what can we incorporate to try to be proactive in these conversations. We have counselors that can help do that at the secondary more than we do at the elementary. So that work continues at both elementary. The structure looks different because of, we don't take more instructional time out of the elementary because we already have our SEL curriculum. So it replaces some of those lessons that we feel like, hey, this is a lesson that we could be doing now so that we can address something that we see or hear. At the secondary level, they have different structures with their seminar class. that it takes place
So
in
the
there.
seminar classes were some of, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying, to my head being clogged up, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that at one point in time, through our SOAR data before, and just other things, that it was like, okay, we have to address these behaviors before they're happening, and part of that is the diversity and advocacy committee, but wanting to make sure that we weren't losing anything at the secondary level in this reorganization.
No, and again, I think that has been bolstered by some of the work that we are doing with seminar, and seminar looks different 5 years later as well. We actually have it called seminar across the,
It's all the same now.
Yeah.
They use some different terms though.
yeah, at every single building, so I
Oh,
never knew
sure.
what it was.
Yeah.
But I think that, as far as PBIS, as far as the SOAR matrix, I think that we are a little bit further along in the elementary than we are in the secondary, but the kids are coming up now with it.
True,
You know, and that was always the goal,
yes,
is that, you
Teach
know,
them early,
yes.
yeah,
and hopefully
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah,
But you gotta reinforce it.
I think, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just to further that response is that one of the current job responsibilities that will continue over into the student support specialist role is that tier 2 intervention coordinator for behavior, which really is obviously responsive to data, but then it's also preventing a smaller issue from becoming a bigger issue. So each of those people in the building have a full caseload of kids that they're meeting with to differentiate interventions for things that are not a huge deal, but they could be if we don't address it when they're starting. And then just things outside the scope of this map is that there's also been an investment in intervention classes at the secondary level,
Yes.
which won't be reflected on this, but would be something that secondary students can take advantage of in their schedule if they need that level of support.
yes, we've added reading intervention classes, math intervention classes at the middle school level, and then, a class called guided academics at the high school level to help kids either organize themselves, you know, have a teacher working directly with them to make sure that they have their homework in, to reteach, you know, concepts if needed. We have a variety of different really great high school teachers that, have really enjoyed kind of owning that, you know, those group of kids